You were talking about how uh like people rely on science and they think that science is like it has all the answers, but really the
Yeah,
core of science is that we have to it's really a tool for questioning things, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is that science is actually a byproduct of philosophy. So what from philosophy is the important thing is to ask questions, not so much the answers. But in science, the answers are more important. So I think that's why people get confused and they just want to answer questions quickly rather than just thinking of expanding their ways of finding multiple ideas. Like you see, for example, like I said, the lower back pain concept as something that can be changed, and we can find new ways to treat patients without having the dogma or the ideas that that it's just purely mechanical and it's just because of your lower back arch. That's an idea that we are slowly transitioning from and going into a more expanded concept of back pain and pain in general. So in that sense, yeah, we're answering a question, but we're also giving room to think outside of the box, because if it's like science is about progress, and if you just stick to the old answers that you have, you will never go anywhere, you'll never progress. And that's like the whole point of science, is just keep progressing, keep challenging, keep pushing the limits, not just settle with the answers that you already have and just be like, that's it, that's my identity, that's all I need. That's not how it works. It's
Right.
uncomfortable. Science is very uncomfortable.
Yeah. It is very uncomfortable, but people people use it for comfort when they say things like, "Oh, scientists say blah blah blah," and then it's just this idea out there that they attach themselves to because scientists said it, and that's what most people think science is. You know,
Yeah.
it's that we've proven something, and then now that it's proven, we can hold on to that idea so that we can make the world more simple. That's what humans do, right? We just try and simplify things and recognize patterns. I
Mhm.
think that's just human nature. But science is supposed to be the tool that helps us disrupt that and allows us to question things and see if we can be a little more right, not right about everything, because we know that things constantly change, right?
And you see this throughout history, like the examples of, like, for example, Galileo or Copernicus. You know, when they started seeing the solar system as different than what people used to think, and they're like they were like, okay, the Earth is actually turning around the sun, and it's not the other way around. We're not the center of the universe. And everyone went mad, and they excommunicated him, I think, or something like that. And it's like, this is not so far from the truth. This is not like, it's kind of happening today as well, because every
Mm,
time you challenge something, people just, like, they go crazy, and they they think that by holding on to their ideas, they're actually progressive, but like, you just repeating the past, and it's just a continuous cycle of like provoking and then getting a reaction that is not the one you wanted.
yeah, 100% for sure. So, are there things in jujitsu, whether you've noticed it just seeing people get injured or being in the realm and talking to physios who treat jujitsu athletes or talking to, the people that instruct the classes, are there any long-standing beliefs or myths that are very prevalent in BJJ that you think need to be challenged?
Yeah, a lot. Firstly, the idea that lifting weights makes you slow or stiff. Or,
Mm,
I mean, I had my instructor is very open minded, and I love the way he teaches. But like, um, I believe that, like, when I was having a conversation with him, he thought that the reason I was getting injured is because I was lifting weights and getting stiff. But I told him that basically, and it's funny because I have like two meniscus injuries, and
mhm.
it's like I didn't do any MRIs or anything, but I went to the doc and he did some tests, and we realized that okay, it's no big deal. He told me like that doctor actually was progressive, and
Mm.
when I reflect upon it, I'm like, how did I get injured? I realized it's because I was actually not lifting weights. Every time I stop lifting weights for a certain period of time, and I go to jiu-jitsu, I get injured because the sport is so hard on your joints, on your knees. So number one, lifting weights is very important. Like this is a non-negotiable. If you want to at least have um, a longer career and practice jiu-jitsu longer, you need to lift weights. Like for me, that's non-negotiable. The second thing is that it's not so much a belief, but it's more like it's something that I've been discussing with a lot of like jiu-jitsu athletes, and I realized that when you go into the gym, they don't think that what they're doing is taxing on their body. uh, what I mean by that is that like they think it's just skills, and yeah, this is what you're taught to believe. It's just about skills and all that. But I've started to realize that I used to think the same way. It's like jujitsu is separate and lifting is separate, but it's still a load. You know, like when you attempt a triangle and you succeed at it, then you attempt it again and again and again. That's a load on your knee. The angle and the rotation on the knee. That's how I injured my meniscus, because I was doing the same technique over and over and over and over. I thought that it was like it was cool, but it's like lifting weights. Like if you keep doing squats every single day, same weight, and there's no progression or regression, you're gonna get injured. You know, like there has to be some like form of balance. Like when you do a squat, you do sets and reps and specific tempos and all that stuff. In jiu-jitsu, you don't really have that luxury, but you can have a journal where you say, okay, today I attempted 5 triangles. Now, you know, like if you go from one session attempting 5 triangles to the next session attempting 20, that's like a big jump on load. You know, like if,
Mm.
if you want to look at it from that perspective. And I'm really obsessed with data in general, and having to quantify every single thing, because I feel like when we are able to quantify things, we can actually have an objective measure. When someone's injured or when someone is like overtraining, if you just keep doing things randomly, not actually measuring your progress in the gym, in like the jiu-jitsu gym, then I don't see how your performance is going to get better. And this is also a belief in general. When people go into jiu-jitsu, including myself, you just go and you train. You have no purpose. Oh, today I'm going to work on this, today you just think that you're going to get better with time, which you will. But you would never say this when you're studying for an exam or
Mm.
going to the, you always have a plan. So why don't you have a plan when you're practicing? And that's something that's lacking in combat sports in general, development. Like when you look at wrestlers, they're very highly developed because from high school up until college they drill things. They have their coach has like a sheet filled with drills. American football is the same thing. You drill positions, you study the game, you look at footage. And and soccer, basketball, all these things, they have, it's a skill based sport, and they have everything quantified. Us in martial arts, we don't do that, not even with striking. We don't watch film. We don't. I guarantee you that if you watch film and understand how the sport is, when you watch it from your perspective, you're gonna see that there's a lot of room to improve, and you're gonna realize, okay, this position might be risky for some people. A lot of people get injured with that position, so I'm not gonna try and play with it, or I will be
Mm.
careful. But if you just completely oblivious to the outside world and just do jiu-jitsu without anything else, I don't see how that could work out in long term.
Mm. Yeah. So lot to dive into there. I think the idea of lifting weights to prevent an injury, it's it makes sense intuitively. But I
Yeah,
think there's also a counter argument, and I think someone like Greg Lehman. Are you familiar with Greg Lehman?
of course.
Yeah, I think he would make the counter argument here of why isn't jujitsu enough as a stressor? Like shouldn't jujitsu prepare you enough for jujitsu? or do you need other things to do it? On the other hand, I see why, lifting weights can be helpful, because if you are a stronger person, I think there is a lower risk that someone could put you into a position that's less favorable, and you have your muscles to help protect yourself a little bit more. And you also are exposing your body to different stresses. So maybe in that way you can be more resilient. So I think you can make an argument on either side there. What do you think?
I completely agree. I understand the premise of, for example, Lehman's philosophy. That's why I said, if you quantify jujitsu in the sense, if you see it as a load, and if you measure how many techniques you drill, how intense you go, you could make the argument that jujitsu could be enough, in the sense that, okay, you're quantifying it, you're hitting your daily reps, and so you're training jiu-jitsu and not getting injured, and the load is getting managed in a proper way. But it's very hard in a sport like jiu-jitsu. You can do it, like, that's why I feel like a combination of both. It's not like this or
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
So having being super technical is very important, like. And the thing is, with lifting weights, it's like, it's not really magic. Like, I it's not like it's gonna completely eradicate injury, but the concept of lifting weights for me is not just about the movements or whatever. It's about tissue resiliency. So if you
Hmm.
expose your joints to loads that are very, because you can't, for example, load a triangle. You cannot load I don't know, hip escape. You
Right.
cannot load it. You cannot put 140 kilograms on that, but you can on a squat bar or on a bench press. So you are technically getting more strong, and this is also
Yeah.
goes into a more specific niche. It's called special strength, where you could kind of combine the skill of jiu-jitsu with weight training, with specific movements, like movements that would be more beneficial for the jiu-jitsu athlete. That's
Mm.
where we come in as therapists and trainers, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's two things there. Like lifting weights can be like, we have to ask, is lifting weights helpful for performance in jujitsu? And also, is it helpful for injury? Because it's two different things. I think I think it's hard to argue against the performance aspect.
Yeah,
Like if you get stronger in the weight room, there will
yeah,
likely be some carryover. And of course, in jujitsu, strength isn't everything, especially if someone has 10 years of experience on you. But when experience becomes a little more similar, the your physical attributes start to become a little more important, right? Um, but also, so you were saying just the quantifying the jujitsu as a load, and it's pretty undeniable that a triangle is a load on your knees. That all the stress of jujitsu is real physical stress, and it does count. And if you're not focusing on your recovery, that sort of stuff will add up over time, right? You need to take recovery seriously so that you can adapt to those stresses, whether it's the weight room or whether it's jujitsu. And you could probably make an argument that if you're not doing that, and you're just going and you're not keeping track of everything, and you're just going and going and going and pushing through a ton of pain, maybe that would be a little bit too much.
this is what they all do, unfortunately. All of the practitioners, like, I don't know. It's like the culture back then, I guess. The fact that the sport is slowly transitioning from a culture of toughness to a culture of of being smart, of
Mm.
thinking. Like, I could give you the example of Mike. I forgot. I can't pronounce his last name, but Mike Musim. I don't know. He's like a jiu-jitsu practitioner, but he's a complete geek, and
Oh, the
he's
really
like,
young dude, the really young guy.
yeah,
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 he's
and
he's incredible.
yeah, and Gordon Ryan. Like, I know Gordon Ryan is physical and everything, but Gordon Ryan is probably the least athletic jiu-jitsu player I've ever seen.
Mm.
He's slow, but he's super technical. So it's not about roughness. Like, he's submitting guys that are twice his size and
Mm.
all that. He's still strong, but he's able to apply that strength correctly. So it's like a balance between strength and technique. And when I see athletes that just um, they grind through training, they just train and train and train, and they completely neglect the other side of their body, which is like lifting
Mm.
and and recovering. That's
Yeah.
where it becomes a problem, and they don't realize it. And you don't I didn't realize it until I started tracking stuff. That's like nutrition. When you start tracking what you eat, you realize, oh, that's how much
Yeah.
I'm eating. Cut back. you know
Right.
and it's a game changer. It's so simple, but it's so hard.
Yeah. So do you think it's important to track like the hours that you're going in or like the specific movements? Because, a lot of people when it comes to nutrition, right, they'll say that like tracking undeniably will show you how much you're eating, if you're
Mm.
doing it accurately. But other people, you can make the argument that maybe they shouldn't be tracking because they might become a little obsessed with it. And there's other strategies, right? That's not the only way to lose weight. So do you think there's other ways that you can help
Well,
mitigate your risk of injury?
mm, I think, like, I would like try and grab the stick from the middle by saying you could track in the beginning just to see how it feels, because like it's like nutrition. You just tell them track in the beginning just to see, get an idea, get a feel, and then just kind of wing it, because it's the concept of auto regulation. So
Mm-hmm.
as you get experience as an athlete, even just in the weight room, you can kind of guess, okay, I have the next rep in the tank or I don't have it. But when you're a beginner, you just go all out because you think that this is how you're supposed to train. So
Right.
in the beginning, obviously, people are gonna make mistakes. There's plenty of room to make mistakes. But once you get to that advanced level, you're not gonna be tracking. You're gonna kind of get a feel of how your body's feeling. It just comes with experience. But initially, speaking, tracking could be a good thing. And I actually am considering getting a journal where I could like write what I'm gonna practice for the day, and that's like for me a non-negotiable, because like I told you, we just go into practice and we hit triangles after triangles, or
Yeah.
we some people there's even studies on the body composition of guard players versus top players, and like
Really.
I'm sure there's gonna be big differences in performance, like your hip flexors, your your abdomen is more active during the guard game. And so like it's so sophisticated in terms of a sport that you have to kind of also understand those details. And this is very helpful also when you're a physical therapist that deals with these athletes. If you're playing the sport, that's a big thing. If you're playing a sport, that gives you a big uh, point of view compared to
Mm.
the other therapists, because they don't understand the demands of the sport, so they wouldn't be able to help you. So that's why they just hash it out and say, okay, stop doing jiu-jitsu. But they don't understand. They
Right.
You'll have more empathy. You'll have, because as a practitioner of the sport, you'll understand their frustrations. You'll understand that they want to get back on the mat, and you're gonna, as a therapist, you're gonna be able to help them because you understand the mechanics of the sport and
Mm.
what their body's capable of.
Right. And you could, let's say they have a hip flexor injury as an example. You could then start to think about the sport in a little bit more detail and think about what things might aggravate their injury. Is it possible for them to do jujitsu without there being too much stress on the hip flexor? And some people would think, if they don't know the sport well, they would be like, no, probably not. It's too much. But people can modify things. And it's just like in the weight room, when someone gets an injury with, let's say, like their, again, hip flexor, they're squatting ass to grass with the heavy barbell on. And when they do that, they're aggravating their hip flexor. Does that mean they shouldn't do anything? Of course not. We modify things if the thing that they're doing over and over and over and over again is just flaring them up, then we modify. It doesn't mean you need to stop completely. Um, so
Training
I
around an
think,
injury,
sorry,
it's the concept of training around an injury, which is
right?
something I feel like is so important.
Hmm. I do too. So with that said, that's easier to do in the weight room, I think, than in jujitsu, because the weight room's much more predictable, right? If you're squatting, you just go up and down, up and down. It's simple. It's
Yeah.
simple. But with jujitsu, it's much less predictable, especially if you are rolling or sparring. So how do you work your way around that?
As an athlete myself, I don't know. For example, before, when Corona hit, I would constantly film myself doing shadow boxing to perfect my technique. I don't see why it wouldn't apply to jiu-jitsu. If you're rolling with someone, like let's say live rounds or whatever, if the gym allows it, if you film yourself, you can see your tendency, you sees, and you can study yourself and see also what you do more of. So let's say, for example, you're more of a a triangle guy, so you like to hit triangles a lot. So like you can kind of estimate how many triangles you can hit per training sessions, and then you have the intention of, okay, this is the number of triangles I can hit. In terms of rehab, for example, when you work around an injury, you can use that number to scale it, or you can completely change and use another position, because there's so many different positions. Like when I had my meniscus injury, I stopped playing guard. I stopped doing fancy stuff with my knees. I just focused on my top control, my passing the guard, and I was fine. I mean, as long as the injury is not completely debilitating,
Right.
you should be fine. Training around an injury, I believe also it could be beneficial, because like you were not taking time away from the sport and you're still doing something, which is better than nothing.
Of course, it's better to stay active if you can do that. Now, if you had a very recent tear and it was the day before, maybe don't go to jujitsu the
Yeah.
next day. But you don't need to wait until you're fully healed to go back to doing it. There, as you said, there's ways that you can modify. And if you're noticing that you're in pain whenever you're playing guard, maybe don't do that as much if you can, you know?
And that improves your game too. Like it really
Yeah.
improves your game. It's crazy, but I don't remember who said it, but someone said that injuries make you better because they expand your game. They force you to go out of your comfort zone, because you like
Mm,
playing guard. You keep playing guard, but now you can't play guard. So you gotta expand your game. You gotta find ways to work around it and find new techniques and new things. And that's when like everything changes.
for sure. For sure. And so many people in jiu-jitsu are really, really kind. They're nice people. And if you were about
No
to
more.
roll with someone, you let them know what sort of injury you have, and you say like here, and a physio who understands jiu-jitsu well can really help you understand these sorts of things. Where you say, hey, I have these sorts of injuries and they hurt in this position, this position, this position. So like, could we just try this type of rolling? Can we flow a little bit instead of going all out? Can we do it in a way where I'm just trying to pass your guard, and then if you sweep me or something and then I'm in the guard, we just stop because I'm probably going to get hurt.
That's literally a drill. Like you can get so good at this specific skill of like, okay, if you sweep, it's positional drilling. Like the thing is, and if we just did more technical work, like if you watch the Danaher guys, all they do is just they drill, they keep drilling and they drill, and actually Danaher made a very good instructional on the positions that are very dangerous that you should not do in
Mm,
jiu-jitsu, and I think it's free, you can download it. And when he explains the technique or whatever, he says like always keep drilling. And these things, like, you don't always have to go 100%, because
yeah.
this is unfortunately the reality. Like you just go, you get worked up, you're like, oh my god. Even if you're injured, sometimes you're just like, I'm gonna take it slow today, and you go in and someone just rattles you up, or you get too excited and you do a move and you hurt yourself again. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's
Yeah.
also a sport of self-discipline. Like you have to discipline yourself and work around your injury and stick to the program.
Mm. Because we can make an argument that pain isn't always damage, which is true. You could do things and it could be a little bit painful, and it's not doesn't mean it's necessarily bad for your injury. But there is such a thing as too much. And jujitsu guys will have that habit of doing way too much, and they'll push and push and push and push and push. And that can make things really hard to recover from. So I think it is really important to be disciplined. So I recently had a jujitsu athlete who was coming to see me, and for a bit he just stopped going to jujitsu because that's what he thought was best. Uh, and then I recommended that he tries it again, but maybe don't roll for a little bit. Do the drills and everything. Do what's predictable, but for now, do what isn't as like stay away from the things that are potentially more dangerous. Um, and then I don't blame him for doing this, and it's almost to be expected with jujitsu guys. But before I said I think you could go back to rolling, he obviously already started rolling. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, this is also something that like you should try and kind of like as a human being kind of predict their behavior. Like they're not gonna always listen to you,
Yeah.
so give your advice with it, like try to not really limit them. Try to
Yeah.
kind of like be in their shoes where like okay, I want to give you as much freedom as possible while
Mm-hmm.
still keeping you safe, because it's easy for me to tell the athlete just do this, just do that, but
Yeah.
as a human being I know I would do the same thing, you know.
Of course.
So this
Yeah. 100%.
perspective shift is very important, and I feel like, you know, also I don't know if you know Dr. Kickass
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like he's very famous. I like his approach in the sense that when he clears someone from an injury, he rolls with him and he
Mm-hmm.
drills certain positions. Does that hurt? Does that this is what I'm
That's
talking.
cool. That's cool.
That's very good, because
Yeah.
now the athlete not only feels confident in you as a practitioner, but you can get a gauge of whether he can train or not, and you can
Mm-hmm.
give him, okay, don't do this position, don't do that position, don't do this position, don't do that position, and he still can go roll, but he's gonna be very careful not to hit those positions. So because if you tell him not to roll completely, he's gonna do what you just say. He's just gonna go and roll anyway. So basically, I've never talked about this before, but the reason I got into physiotherapy in the first place was because of martial arts, because I had this idea that it would give me a better understanding of how the human body works.
Mm-hmm.
And as I kept going on with sports and physiotherapy, I realized this is actually much cooler to have a therapist that also practices your sport. I mean, I wish I had that. This is a game like, and the good thing is the sport is growing. Like you have a lot of people from doctors to entrepreneurs to students. Everyone's joining the sport, and I feel like give it maybe like another 5 to 10 years, and I don't know. I feel like there's gonna be a major boost in the sport as a whole, and in terms of like the population that's practicing the sport. And I don't know, people will just start to accept the the sport better, especially the the healthcare professionals. When they start practicing the sport itself, they will start to understand better and be able to treat better. I don't know about other sports. Like, do you have to play basketball to treat an athlete that plays basketball? I don't know.
Yeah.
I could make you could make the argument for it, but in jiu-jitsu, I believe it's a very unique sport. I don't feel like I can compare it to something specific because it's very unorthodox in the way we play it, and you really need to experience it or try it at least to understand it. Whereas like basketball, you watch basketball on TV, you watch uh, football on TV, but you don't watch jiu-jitsu on TV. Maybe in the future they'll have it on TV and it'll become
Yeah.
like the next.
Yeah. So I like those are my two main sports actually. You know, basketball and jujitsu. Um, and I agree with you that I think if you have experience in both, it helps. But I think basketball is a little bit easier to understand and it's more common and people understand the demands of it. Do you need to be a basketball player in order to like a basketball player and a physio in order to treat a basketball player? I think no. I think
No.
it could help. It could give you a small advantage, but I don't think it's necessary. What I do think is necessary is that if you don't understand the sport, you do your due diligence and you take your time to really understand the demands of it by things like watching film. And if you can't do that, then I think you should refer out. With
Yeah.
jujitsu, I think again it is helpful to do the sport, and I think maybe even more so than basketball. But I still think you can treat jujitsu players without doing jujitsu, if you take a lot of time to understand it. Maybe not by watching it on TV, but there's a lot of content on YouTube. So you, if you don't do that, if you don't go to YouTube, I think you'll really struggle to treat a jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah.
Because what
And
you'll do is rely on what you typically do, which is you do a lot of gym-based movements, which with the early stages of injury is great. And I have a friend of mine who did that. He injured himself 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And he never made 100% recovery because he never went back to jiu-jitsu. He stopped progressing at these typical gym movements. But end stage rehab for jiu-jitsu, you need to take it a step further because the demands of the sport are not predictable like they are in the
that's
weight
the
room.
thing. Exactly. Like if you're a therapist, you can grow with that patient and like be more specific. And the thing also that I think is good is that, like I said, the sport is growing, so it's much more accessible. Like, not that basketball is not accessible, but everyone wants to to do jiu-jitsu, like kids first they go, then the parents watch and they're like, oh my god, there's older people also doing jiu-jitsu, so they join. I don't know, I just feel like it's kind of becoming the thing where everyone can join and
Yeah.
nobody's gonna get hurt. It's so easy. Even actually, you don't have to do the sport, but you can just walk into a gym, try a few sessions, and like, hmm, I mean, eh,
Yeah.
that's my perspective, I believe.
Yeah. And the rolling with someone to understand the return to play as a physiotherapist, that's really cool. And I think a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms would benefit from having a physiotherapist on their team so that they could have some weights, have some rehab equipment, but also, if you have someone who knows jiu-jitsu and is a physiotherapist, that's a really powerful tool to have. And if you're a jiu-jitsu gym owner, how many times do you lose clientele because they're injured? You could still have someone come to your facility even though they're injured. It's not a good reason in most instances, in a lot of instances at least, to stop rolling completely and to stop jiu-jitsu completely.
You seen those guys that just you roll with them and you ask them what's wrong, and they just pull out their knee and they just keep moving it because of the laxity of the knee. I mean, the athletes have some of the worst knees I've ever seen. I had a friend who could pull his knee backwards and forwards and just it's completely loose. I'm like, you've never like he tells me I had surgery and and he just rolls and he's like a brown belt. He goes hard with wrestlers. The only thing that I believe probably allowed him to train for that long is that he lifts weights. But at some point, like he started to feel less confident competing and he started getting into teaching, which is fine. But this shows you how much jiu-jitsu athletes are not willing to sacrifice just a little bit of time in the gym just so that they
Mm.
can get better. Like it's amazing. Not actually just jiu-jitsu athletes. From what I know, there's actually even MMA athletes. They think that the sport is enough. So maybe it answers Greg Lehman's question, because if you keep doing the sport over and over and over again with no
Yeah.
like, this is the reality and the consequence of um, not lifting weights. And when you go and look at the higher levels, and whether it's in jiu-jitsu or MMA, they're all lifters. And the thing is, this is actually what separates the good athletes from the bad athletes, because those who lift are able to train more. They're able to go to higher levels of competition, and I don't think the others are going to be able to catch up with just skill training. And strength is never a weakness. Like, whoever said that strength is a weakness in jiu-jitsu competitions, like, you have not seen a jiu-jitsu competition. I've seen some big guys go head to head and slam each other to the ground. I'm like, of course you need to be strong for the sport.
Yeah.
Like, this idea is just technique is not, I don't buy it.
Yeah, for sure not. Like it definitely plays a role. Definitely in performance for sure. Like you can't, again, as we said earlier, it gets to a point where if you guys are even skill, then the physical attributes are going to play a role. Whether are you going to gas out quicker? Do you have less cardio than the person? Are you a lot weaker than the person? These things start to matter. If I was to roll with somebody who's 110 pounds but has 10 years of experience on me, they'll probably beat me, you know, because they know a lot more. But if I'm rolling with someone who has the same level of experience with me and they've never been in the weight room before, I tend to be stronger than those people, and it gives me a big advantage.
And it feels good. Like you're gonna feel good. It's gonna make you want to do more jujitsu because now it's kind of like upgrading to a superpower. Now you're strong and you're doing jujitsu, so you go into the gym super motivated to
Yeah,
actually test the strength that you've built. Like,
right. For sure, for sure. It definitely adds to it. It's fun. It's fun to be strong in jujitsu. It definitely is. And I'm saying this as a white belt who hasn't, um, like I haven't been doing it for that long. It's probably been about 8 months total. Uh, but when I'm rolling with people that are a higher belt, I think I could survive a little bit longer because I'm strong. It does help, and it's fun knowing that even though I'm not the most skilled guy, sometimes I could rely on that a little bit.
yeah.
I think flexibility is a big thing too.
Oh yeah.
You could spend
Oh, yeah.
time like training your flexibility as well.
I,
And sorry, go ahead.
no, I agree completely.
Yeah. Do you ever take time to stretch or to do anything like that?
I'm guilty of that. I always say that strength training is enough. I mean, the reason I don't really stretch, like, because I feel like I'm kind of like, normally I'm a flexible guy and I'm skinny. So it took me a lot of time to build muscle and to be strong.
Yeah.
Probably gonna have an easier time stretching than most people, but in a sense, I haven't really given it much thought. But after the meniscus injury and all that, I'm thinking, well, okay, so should I stretch these positions? And this is actually something that I've been thinking about and dabbling with. Dr. Kikas, he uses a lot of functional range conditioning,
Yeah.
where he just, not that I'm skeptical of the technique, but I understand its application
Hmm.
in terms of jiu-jitsu because of the fact that he's able to load these positions that actually we can't load at the gym, isometrically speaking, which is still good. Like it's either, even though you can't really put weight on it, loading it isometrically is still better than nothing, which is something that also I've been thinking about. But it's just I don't enjoy it. So it's very hard. This is also another thing. Like when you have an athlete, it's the same thing as a human being. You have to give them something that is gonna help them and that they can enjoy. So you
Yeah,
gotta have a wide range of tools to help them because at the end of the day, if they don't enjoy it, they're not gonna stick with it.
for sure. Yeah, you have to be creative. And end stage jujitsu rehab, it requires a lot of creativity, right? Because they have to enjoy it, but also you have to be able to think outside the box and go away from the normal stuff that you would do in rehab, because you have to be taking people to their end range and loading those positions. Um, Now again, it would help if you're just roll with them and then you could do it for them, but um, easier said than done for sure for this need for creativity. So, what are some common injuries in jiu-jitsu? And let's discuss what that end stage rehab might need to look like.
Some common injuries, I think, like uh, most probably from the research that I read, is like knees,
Hmm.
elbows, and shoulders. Like
Hmm.
looking, I think maybe you could say there's a correlation between the high submission uh, rates, like the most successful submissions, and the rate of injury. So if kimura is more successful and people are hitting more kimuras, then means that shoulder injuries are also more prone to getting hurt
Right.
in that sense. But I mean, these are the three big ones, but like I told you, like it's so diverse as a sport. Like
Right.
imagine getting a client 10th planet BJJ that does rubber guard a lot. How are you gonna treat that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
These guys that are super flexible, or I don't know, like some form of like submission that is just so weird that that's how he got injured. Like the mechanism of injury is not always understood.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like having that background in jiu-jitsu is important. So
Yeah.
in knees mostly, and elbows, shoulders, and ankles probably.
Mhm.
So
For
yeah,
sure.
these are the key points.
So like let's talk about like let's say an arm bar is pretty common, right? Which is where you could
Elbow.
injure the shoulder, but you could also injure the elbow, and you're in this fully
Yeah.
extended position, and you might just reach the end of your physical capacity in an arm bar, and something in your elbow might go. Um, so, and like the early stages of rehab for that, they might look very similar to many different other types of elbow injuries, right? Like you're trying to reduce swelling, get the range of motion back, reduce the symptoms, and then eventually you'll start strengthening their biceps and their triceps and just all the muscles that cross the elbow. But then you'll get to a point where these people will want to go back to jiu-jitsu, and they kind of have to be prepared for an armbar again, right? They might have apprehension getting into that position. I think what you might want to start experimenting with is doing something like a bicep curl, but in a way where it really loads that end range position. So if you're just standing upright and doing that bicep curl, most of the range or most of the stress will be when you are perpendicular to gravity, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be when the forearm is at about 90 degrees, or when the elbow is flexed at about 90 degrees. So you're going to have to change the angle a little bit so that more of the stress is being applied in that end range.
In the end range, exactly. And I actually played with that myself. I was doing some calisthenics back then, and I was like, the gymnasts, they do a lot of end range work, like the planche, the position where your arms completely straight, or
Yeah.
the rings where they're just completely like they're like I think it's called an iron cross. I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of that. That helped a lot in my jiu-jitsu,
Mhm.
like the end range work and the isometric work and doing a lot of handstands. I You could make an argument that there's a lot of like body weight gymnastic type movements that would carry over very well to jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
because of like the commonalities they have with each other, especially in the end range stuff. Like a lot of like um, a lot of those gymnastic athletes and calisthenic athletes, they do a lot of isometric work,
Yeah.
and if we use these concepts and apply them, could be a fun way to introduce it into jiu-jitsu. I'm not necessarily saying you have to do gymnastic, but
Yeah.
this is something that I played with. I realized isometric work can have like not even loading a bicep. Like let's say, for example, not doing a bicep curl, but let's say you put a bar and you put a weight that they cannot move, and you just ask them to press as much as possible, just isometrically,
Yeah.
because you want to load that joint, but they can't really tolerate any loads, but they can tolerate just isometrically moving, pushing against it, which is like it's not like the muscle is not moving, but you're still loading it.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And that's a good alternative. I agree with what you're saying about the gymnastics, but the thing about that is there is a barrier. And that
Yeah,
barrier is people that can't control their body weight very well.
yeah.
So I think like that is a good alternative for sure. I think if they can do things that are body weight and the gymnastic stuff, it's a fantastic option. But some people, they don't have the body control, or they might be of a higher body fat percentage, and it just might
Yeah.
be a little more difficult for them. Not to
I
say
mean,
that people with a higher body fat can't do that sort of stuff, of course, but if you're very skinny, it's easier to do that sort of stuff.
yeah, that's why it requires you to be lean. I mean, the only thing that I took from the experience of training calisthenics is just the isometric stuff and how
Yeah.
much it helps to actually alleviate some of the damage that you get constantly from jiu-jitsu. Like so I started experimenting with isometric stuff, and you can like practically load a lot of positions like that, from neck to ankle to is you have lots of room to be creative, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to use whenever I get to treat a physiotherapy
Yeah, I think it's a great option.
jiu-jitsu athlete.
Yeah, once you're graduated and you're practicing, I think it's a great option for sure. Um, yeah, I have an MCL guy right now, and that's gonna be like right now we're just training positions that are similar, but soon in my mind, like the last stage of this rehab is we're gonna be spending a lot of time in these positions isometrically. Uh, and if you don't do any of that, then it's difficult to be prepared for it in jiu-jitsu, because the only time when you're spending times in those positions is when you're about to tap out. you know so it's a good idea to spend a little bit more time in them, in a way where it's like you're loading it before that threshold where an injury is about to occur, so you can practice being a little bit stronger in them.
And all of the positions in jiu-jitsu, most of them, I guess, like the submissions, they're all isometric work. Whether you're the one
Mm-hmm.
applying the submission or you're the one that's being put in that position. You're in an arm bar. You're completely extending your hips and trying to finish the arm bar, and the other guy also is like in a fully extended position. Same
Right.
thing with the rear naked choke. Like you're not really doing anything other than just trying to apply pressure and isometrically contracting.
Yeah.
Same thing with the ankle locks. I mean, isometric work, I believe, for jiu-jitsu athletes is extremely important from a rehab perspective and from a performance perspective, because if you're able to hold that position for longer under isometric tension, then you're probably going to be able to finish that person. But if you gas out and your arms uh, completely get tired during competition or during practice, then you lose that position that was so good.
Yeah.
It's just a performance issue. It's not really a technique issue.
Right, for sure. And then, like, again, then we're getting into the nuance of, is jujitsu enough to train that isometric position? And maybe in some people, if they're going very frequently, but other people could definitely benefit from training that sort of stuff outside of the jiu-jitsu gym, right?
Yeah, of course. And there's two things I want to say about that. Is the first one is that I read that actually people who go more frequently to jiu-jitsu have higher chances of getting injured. So that's why I am so excited about jiu-jitsu being a global sport, because I want researchers to actually give me answers. I want them to do research and
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at injuries and try and give me an answer of like why these people get injured more, because we don't really have research on that. And so I would come up with an answer, like for example writing down a journal of how many submissions.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is just drilling and being technical, because I believe in the end of the day, if you're technically sound, you're gonna have less chances of getting injured, in the sense that if you understand the technique, for example, sometimes a white belt cannot understand the technique, so they would apply an armbar, but they don't know. Okay, I got it. Sometimes, like if you look at the Danaher guys, when they do leg locks, they just as soon as they get the position, they let go, because
Right.
they know I got it. It's like there's no need to squeeze or whatever. Sometimes some guy, I'm trying to finish the armbar on him. He's extremely flexible. I could go and go 120% and try and crank even more, but what's the point? So that's
Right.
like an ego check. So like, get your ego out of the door. Be more technical. If you got the submission and it's good. If you got the position but you couldn't finish, let it go and assess: is it performance, or is this guy a freak? And even if the position didn't work, find another position. So
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes
Yeah,
things happen.
for sure. This jiu-jitsu patient that I have, I told him, roll with if you're going to roll with people that are technical and technically sound, and that have been doing it for a while. Because I'd rather you roll with someone who's good at jujitsu, who understands when to apply pressure and when you could probably back off, versus someone who's there for his first week and doesn't know the etiquette as much, and who's going to be way more aggressive with you, because we've all seen those types of guys, and I'm dealing with an injury from rolling with one of those types of guys now,
There's
and
nothing
it's
more
not
than
it's not that he got me in a lock, it's that, like, we were just practicing a technique. And when you're
yeah.
doing that, it's supposed to be chill. One guy's learning the technique, the other guy's letting it happen. And he's like, my hands are on his chest, and he's breaking my grip as hard as he can. I'm like planting on my wrist over and over and over. I'm like, please stop, man, give me a break.
Yeah, that's there's nothing more dangerous than two white belts going 100%. That's like nuclear level dangerous. Like you can't have that. I swear, sometimes I see the coach and he sees two white belts. He just takes a look at them. It's like, okay, you two don't roll together. Like he knows that.
Yeah,
Roll
yeah.
together, he's gonna have it. And the other thing, there was a very good martial arts channel by a guy called Ramsey Dewey. He said that when you roll with someone or when you spar or do any kind of martial arts where you're engaging in combat, try not to put a percentage on the effort you're putting. Because if I tell you let's go 20%, my 20% maybe you're 50%. And that's where things start to spiral out of control. It's like, oh, you said 20%, so I'm gonna go harder because now it feels harder on me, and it becomes like an all-out war. And I'm like, just don't put. He said, just don't put percentages on performance. Instead, just say, let's go light, let's go technical. Let's Because you would be surprised about the amount of people that would just start light and just it ends up escalating really quickly into a dogfight. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need to put a boundary on it because yeah, if you start light, it's probably not gonna end that way a lot of the time.
yeah. Just say let's roll light, or sometimes I like, please be careful. I have this injury in my elbow. Like you said, like most people would be more than willing to listen to you if it's a good gym that has a good culture. Yeah. So like, there's no reason for you to put yourself at risk, especially if you're not a paid athlete. Like, you're going there, you're paying money to learn and have fun. What's the point of having like $10,000 of worth of medical bills just for a hobby? Like, it's
Yeah,
kind of.
seriously, it's absurd, but it's so common in MMA to just push and to not care, until
Yeah.
you regret it too much.
That's also about something about concussions that I wanted to touch on, but I'm not sure because there's so much literature on concussion, and
Mhm.
as we physical therapists, I don't feel when I did my graduation project, there was a lot of papers saying that a lot of therapists were not even aware of how to treat a concussion. And because I think it's also the 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 approach is, I am a physical therapist, concussion is out of my scope of practice. But in reality, like, it's not that it's out of your scope of practice. You could still treat it, but it's a lot more multi-dimension. Like, you're gonna need a lot of people helping you. You're gonna need like a physician, a sports nutritionist. It's such a complicated diagnosis, and it's very common not just in punching sports like boxing. You can get a concussion in jiu-jitsu if you go for a takedown and someone slams you down hard. I mean,
Yeah,
brain health is so important. I cannot emphasize this. Like, I wish, like, to I wish to see something that is a bit more concrete in the realm of physical therapy, in the terms of like how to treat a concussion, because it's so common. And the the repercussions of a concussion, they're not nice.
yeah.
They it's not a thing where you can just walk it off, or like in LCA. No, there's like, I don't know if you've seen that movie with Will Smith. I think
I
it's called
haven't seen it. What's it? Is
yeah.
it called concussion?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's not gonna go to that extreme, because there's nuances, because the American football athletes that are in the movie, they're all on drugs, so it would affect a bit of the brain chemistry from what they understand. But number one, you cannot diagnose a concussion while someone is living. Not that you cannot diagnose, you cannot detect it like with imaging. It's
mm,
very hard. It's only when you die that they actually are able to detect it. You can detect it when someone has like specific symptoms. So we still have a grasp on it. But when I saw the movie, I'm like, this could affect a lot of lives in a bad way if you don't know how to deal with a concussion as an athlete and as a physical therapist. Like, it's not one of those injuries where you can just completely neglect it. It's very important, like,
right.
I believe.
Absolutely. And a lot of guys go into jiu-jitsu with understanding that there's a lower risk of head injury than other sports where you're actively getting hit in the head. But of course, it's still possible. So we do
Yes.
need to be aware of that sort of stuff for sure. Yeah. All right, man. Anything else to discuss? I think we got a lot there. We should do this again sometime, I think.
Oh, yes, especially I'm on vacation, but I'm like deep into the literature, trying to look at like stuff from concussion and stuff from from jiu-jitsu, and I'm trying to get as much knowledge as possible. So hopefully in the next time we do this, I might have some answers. I might not have some answers. Maybe some good questions.
Yeah. Are
So,
you gonna try and build a practice around jiu-jitsu athletes?
yeah, I'm mostly gonna try and build a practice around that, and combat athletes in general, because
Very
I just enjoy it so much.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you once you have that practice built and you're dealing with those guys. It's gonna be very, very cool to pick your
Yeah,
brain.
thank you, man. It was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, nice to meet you. It was a
Nice to
pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon for sure.
All right, brother. Okay, take care.